Hello, cosmic beings out there. I'm Mannah, a therapeutic astrologer and interviewer. I'm passionate about learning and sharing insights on how to live a better life. I hope you'll stick around as I infiltrate the minds of thought leaders, authors, and healers from around the globe. Wherever you find yourself right now, dear listener, I want you to remember that you have a place to call whole. Now please enjoy this episode. This is the fourth episode with Dr. Claus Springborg. Welcome, Claus.
Thank you.
So today we are talking about the knot of alienation.
Yes.
And it's a really interesting one because you say that it's actually characteristic of all the previously described knots.
Yes.
Can you introduce the knot of alienation?
Yes. So the idea with the knots is that each consecutive knot is kind of a consequence of the previous knot. So that's common for all of them. So first we have the knot of positive reification. This is where we experience being, and then we turn that experience into a thing. And then we become interested in ideas about the thing rather than just the experience. And in that way, we lose the sensory connection or the experience, direct experience of being. That's the first one. Mm-hmm. When that happened, then some of the ideas that we get interested in are ideas about how can we hold on to this thing or produce more of it. And we develop all sorts of hypotheses about how we can do that. But the more we're engaged in those agendas, the more those agendas take our awareness away from being. So that's the knot of conditionality that we get. Mm-hmm. The moment we've turned the experience of being into a thing, our attention gets taken by how to get that thing rather than just dwelling in the experience. Mm-hmm. When that leads to negative outcomes, then that can give us a negative perception of being. That's the knot of negative reification that we spoke about last time. Mm-hmm. And all of this leads us into a world where we seem to be missing certain positive inner states, and we seem to have certain negative inner states, and none of it seems to be our doing, even though it actually is. Mm. And that's the knot of alienation. So the knot of alienation in a nutshell is that we develop a lot of sense-making processes that create negative inner states and rob us of positive inner states. But because these processes get automated and are automatic and unconscious, we think it appears to us as if we're not doing it. And therefore we are alienated from our own creations.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're actually saying that every knot that comes before is connected like that. It's not unique to this one. It's just where we are at.
Yeah, exactly.
In the system. Okay, great. So about the knot of alienation, you say that it occurs when our automated patterns produce problems.
Yes.
And we are oblivious
to
the patterns that we're actually doing it, like you said, that we're actually creating it. We don't know that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So, for example, let's say, let me give you a very concrete example to illustrate this. So imagine that you have the mental habit of classifying any kind of feedback as a personal attack, right? Any time that people give you feedback on a project, on a piece of writing, on your behavior, on whatever, you see it as some sort of personal attack. Now that will mean that you will seem to be attacked from all sides. Right? You will live in a very hostile world. Now, the classification of feedback as personal attacks might be unconscious and automatic, and you don't know that this is something you do. All you know is everybody seems to be out to get you. And so in that case, you are creating this experience of everybody's out to get you, but you don't know you're creating it. And because you don't know you're creating it, you get occupied with thinking about, how do I survive in a world where everybody's out to get me? How can I defend myself against this barrage of personal attacks that are coming at me from all sides? And you think that you are defending yourself against something out there, but actually, first you're creating the impression that you're attacked from all sides, and then you're defending against it. And this is why the knot of alienation, I write that this is what happens when you are fighting your own creations, because you don't know they're your own creations, because you create them through unconscious and automatic processes.
Yeah, so it's leaving us estranged, separated from the group.
It can have many consequences. That would be, maybe you have certain processes that makes you feel estranged and separated from the group.
But what does alienation mean otherwise?
Alienation mean, okay, in that way, alienation, when I talk about being alienated from your own agency, I mean you don't recognize your own agency.
Right.
Yeah.
I really love this quote. Once we have become alienated from our own agency, so that we see things we create as existing independently from our own actions, we begin to become alienated from the world as well. And what I like about it is, okay, so when I don't have a choice, then that, is it correct that I understand it, like then you're separated from the world, and then it's like hard to connect to the world?
Yes, it's like, this is a thread that runs through a lot of spiritual teaching. A lot of spiritual teaching says that our experience of the world is upside down. So it's not that we get the world wrong, we get it like 180 degrees wrong. We get it not just like a little bit wrong this way or that way, we get things completely upside down. Like one of the places where they focus on this is in the teachings on the Enneagram, where they sometimes picture like they have the virtues and the passions, like you can say a correct way and a false way of perceiving human nature. And they sometimes literally the false way, they turn the things upside down to symbolize this. So for example, if you are unaware that the problems that you are facing are your own creation, you think that you have no control over them, even though you actually have 100% control over them. You also think that they are not your responsibility, even though they're actually 100% your responsibility. And many times you will see this, people will say, this and this and this is not my responsibility, even though that's actually the part that they create themselves. And then they will look at other things which are not their creations and say, these are the things I'm responsible for, even though that's actually beyond their control. It's something that I work a lot with, especially in organizational settings, where people start having this idea that they have responsibility for things. And then when I ask, is that actually something that you can control? They say no. I say, well, in what sense do you have responsibility for it? So you get it upside down. In the same way, in a lot of spiritual teaching, they like, for example, when you experience joy or love or something like that, we've spoken about how joy and love and these kind of things, peace, strength, are aspects of being. So actually, what you experience there is the essence of who you are. But that's not how you see it. You see it as you are a person that's separate from that, who has experiences of that. So the thing that is you see as not you. And then there's all your personality traits and the characteristics, which is just like names for the unconscious and automatic patterns that you've adopted. So these things are not you, but you take them to be you. So you see what is not you as you and what is you as not you. And these are some aspects of how we get things 180 degrees wrong, like things turned upside down.
And I was going to ask you why it's so difficult to accept responsibility for our habits, but then that's kind of the answer right there. I don't think that it is.
You don't think it's
Me.
your doing.
No.
You think it's beyond your control. And of course you're not going to feel any responsibility for it if you cannot directly perceive how you create it.
Why do you love this nut so much?
Why I love this nut so much?
Yes, because when we were writing about it together in email, just preparing for this, you were saying, "Oh, I really love this one." Why is that?
I think one of the things I really love about it is that it's there's something wonderful about recognizing your agency and having that opportunity to assume responsibility for your life, for the things that you actually have responsibility for. It's like, I think there's I love all the nuts, but there's something very magical about this discovery of it's like a veil being pulled aside and you see this whole machine room where you go, oh my God, this is how I create the experience. Many of us have heard things like, you are the creator of your own experience. And many people, they subscribe to it as a theoretical idea. And then they have various ideas like, if I just sit on a chair and I think really hard about what I want, then it's going to come true. And you go, no, that's not going to work, right? Many times it's not going to work. And this is because in order for you to, you have to see the processes as they are operating, the processes through which you create your experience. And it's like we are looking for those in the wrong place. And so the nut of alienation is to really discover these processes.
Okay. I feel like asking you, how do we do that? But
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. Okay. Because you have these 7 points. Will that take us to it if we walk through?
Which 7 points?
Identity, causality, value, intention, control, responsibility, nature of reality.
Yes. No, these are 7 examples of things that we get upside down.
Okay.
I think we talked about identity, for example, right? We take things that are not us to be us and things that are us to be not us. So that's getting the identity upside down.
Yeah. Okay. So the cause of it is upside down.
Causes are often upside down as well. Sometimes we think that a certain inner state is caused by external circumstances when in fact it's caused by ourselves. So this is also where we get things upside down. Like, for example, one of the examples, I think, which illustrates how we sometimes get the causal link or the causal arrow flipped is sometimes people will say, if people, for example, are nervous about public speaking, they will say, public speaking creates anxiety in me, right? Standing in front of a lot of people creates anxiety in me. Because I feel all these people may judge me, and so I need to sort of make this flawless performance in order to avoid being judged, right? And this is scary. And I would say, well, actually, maybe it's the other way around. So maybe it's because you conceptualize this as a situation where you need to not make mistakes, so you're focusing your attention on whether or not you make mistakes. That's why the situation appears as an anxiety-provoking situation. But there are many other ways of thinking about public speaking. Like, one way you can think about public speaking is rather than trying to be right or flawless or something like that, you can say, well, here's a bunch of people and I can see if I can make personal connections with them, right? That's interesting. It's a buffet. There's a lot of interesting human beings here, and I can see if I can connect with them. That's exciting. Now it's a completely different situation.
So it's just about the way we think about things.
Yes, we think that the situation inherently is scary, and therefore we have to think about it in a certain way. But actually, the way we think about it determines the nature of the situation.
But in the case of public speaking,
yeah,
I'd say even though I think about it like, oh, this is me, I'm allowing the nervousness to come inside of me. I know that I'm doing something actively. It still takes me over just from like I don't know, but maybe on a nervous system level where I'm just in front of people, it happens in me, even though I think.
But this is exactly how you experience things when things are created through automatic unconscious habits, right?
True.
It doesn't appear as you're doing it.
Yeah.
It appears as this just happens. I go on stage and I'm nervous. I didn't have anything to do with it. But when we're working with a knot of alienation, we look under the hood. We ask the question, how do I manage to produce anxiety? How do I do it? Right?
Yeah.
We get curious about how you do it.
Yeah.
If you think that public speaking that's just the scary situation, you won't ask that question. Because you won't be curious, because you will assume you have nothing to do with it.
Okay, so first step is, we know it's not inherently scary
Yes.
to speak in front of people.
Yeah.
And then we can become curious about whatever comes up
Yes.
for us in that situation.
Yeah, and what are the mental, emotional processes we engage in to create, like really think about it like this. When I get on stage, I am super skilled at producing anxiety, right? I practice producing anxiety, and I'm so good at it that I can do it without even thinking about it.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But how do I do? What is this interesting capacity I have, right?
Okay, so are you saying that even if I feel I don't want to have that capacity, I don't want to be nervous, that's actually blocking for the healing of it, because I need to stay really curious about it?
Yes.
Is that part of...
Exactly. You have to figure out how you do it. If you think that it is created by the external circumstances, you won't have your curiosity directed at the right place. And sometimes people will say, "No, come on, Claus, this is everybody's scared when they stand and talk in front of people, right? It is really the situation." And I just say, well, I have a 3-year-old, right? He'll walk into a room and talk to everybody. He's not nervous about public speaking,
that's
right?
Wonderful.
And I think a lot of kids are not nervous because they haven't learned how to achieve nervousness when they speak to a group of people yet. They just haven't learned it yet. So you have to teach them in order for them to become nervous, right? It's an acquired skill.
So that's a testimony of that. This was planted in us somehow. This is constructed.
Yeah, we
and
learned
not natural.
We learned it.
And so I just want to remind the listeners that we are investigating or exploring being-centered therapy.
Yes, this is right.
So in the center of all we're talking about, around all the knots, but in the center are being.
Yes.
Right? That's how I envision it anyway.
Exactly. And one of the great sources of suffering in life is that we've lost awareness of being. And we started to experience being as a range of positive phenomena that we've lost. So we feel separate from love, we feel separate from peace, we feel separate from joy, we feel separate from connection, we feel separate from all these things, even though we're not. So just like we have learned to be anxious when we do public speaking, we have learned to see ourselves as separate from all these things. We've learned to turn our attention away from being, and therefore creating a world where all these things are rarities or something that we need to actively pursue, even though in reality they're not, because they're just inherent aspects of being. And this is why it's so beautiful to explore the knot of alienation. It's because at the foundation, when you really get good at seeing the processes through which you create the world you live in, then you will start seeing how you create a world in which you are separate from all the things you seek. And when you can see that, you can cease to create that. And then you're one with all the things you seek.
Are you saying that we create with our personality?
What do you mean we create with?
With our personality, with who we think we are. I'm thinking about this quote from the book. Thus, recognizing one's own agency is key to dissolving rather than adding layers to one's personality structure.
Yes. So what I'm talking about there is whenever we encounter, whenever we see a lack of a positive state in us or the presence of a negative state in us, we have a tendency to assume or that this is created by external circumstances or something outside of us. And therefore, we look for ways of dealing with it. So we do something to deal with it. So, for example, maybe you sit down and you say, I don't feel peace in my life. What should I do to feel peace in my life? I should withdraw from other people, for example. That might be something. So now you become a bit of a recluse. So that adds to your personality because you've added a pattern of withdrawing from people in order to find peace. With the knot of alienation, rather than saying, how can you create the peace that you feel you're lacking, we go the other way and say, so you experience a lack of peace. That's fantastic. If peace is truly an aspect of being, it's always present. So the real question is, how do you manage to avoid noticing it? What are the processes in you that consistently take your attention away from the peace that you are inundated in?
And that's personality.
Yes. So you have something in your personality. So personality, I use the word personality or personality structure to refer to the totality of all your unconscious and automatic patterns. Mm-hmm. So you have within your personality a pattern that consistently take your attention away from peace. Now, in order to feel peace, you can either dissolve that see how you do it and dissolve it, which is great because it means you do less and get peace, or you can leave it be, think it has nothing to do with you, and put another layer on top that seeks to imitate the peace that you're turning your attention away from. So, if you, for example, seek peace by withdrawing from people, now you're doing two things. First, you're disconnecting from peace, and then you're withdrawing from people in an attempt to find it. But you can go the other way and say, okay, let me quit the thing about withdrawing from people, and then let me see what is it that I do in the presence of people that make me not feel the peace, right?
Okay,
Maybe
so
what you do is that you think a lot about what other people expect from you and try to live up to everybody's expectation. And then your mind is racing, and you pay attention to this racing mind. And of course you're not going to feel any peace. So, but the solution isn't to withdraw from people. The solution is to stop worrying so much about living up to other people's expectation, right? To dissolve that pattern. And then you'll also have peace, but you'll have peace in a more energy efficient way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel that is the root of many of our problems, is that we think one thing is the solution and it ends up being something we constantly trip over.
Yes.
Like just creating more problems, actually. So earlier you were saying that we think we're responsible for these things, but we're actually responsible for something else. Mm-hmm. How do we recognize what's actually ours and where we have agency and where we can do something else?
I think it's by pursuing the two questions: how do I create negative states in my life, and how do I avoid noticing positive states in my life? And really get absolutely fascinated with this exploration. How do I create the world in which I live? And I think the key thing here is to this is going back to one of my heroes, right? So Gregory Bateson, I think I mentioned before. I love that guy.
Gregory Bateson.
Yeah. So when he looks at learning, he says there are different kinds of learning processes. And I'm not going to go through all the thing because then it would be like we wouldn't talk about anything else in this. But many people, when they think about learning, they think about trial and error learning, right? You're in a kind of situation and you try out different things in order to optimize for some certain outcome. Like, for example, every single time you spend quality time with your partner, you try out different things in order to feel more connected to your partner or whatever. Or, I don't know, if your partner doesn't give you any compliments, you try a bunch of different things to elicit compliments, right? And you figure out what's the best way to elicit the compliments that I want from my partner. Something like this. This is trial and error. So you choose from a set of possible actions and you figure out which of these actions seem to be best at getting the thing that I want, right? It can also be something very simple. It's like how to cook a chicken, right? You can boil it, you can fry it, you can slow cook it in the oven, you can do all sorts of things, and you figure out which one of these do you think is most tasty, right? So you try lots of different things, and in that way you find the best way of dealing with a certain kind of situation. So far, so good. Now, the interesting thing that Gregory Bateson notes is when we say in order to engage in trial and error learning, we have to experience the same situation multiple times. Right? If we don't experience it multiple times, we'll just have one shot at dealing with it, so we can't learn to deal with it better. And actually, we never experience the same situation twice, right? This is a truth that was mentioned by all the way back in Greek philosophy by Heraclitus, right? When he says you can't step into the same river twice.
So it looks the same, it feels the same, but it's not actually the same.
It can never be exactly the same. Just
different time.
It's a different
version of you.
Exactly. You're 5 minutes older. There was like I don't know. The sun was in a different position. Yeah. There's always something that's different. Yeah. So the experience of the only way that we can engage in trial and error learning is by classifying multiple situations as if they're the same. Right? But who does that classification? You do. You're the one that determines whether a situation is this kind of a situation or that kind of situation.
Yeah, it's me again.
It's you again, yes, right. So, and this is profoundly ambiguous. Like, for example, if many times when I work with clients, I'll ask them the question, what kind of situation do you see this situation as? Because it directly points to their involvement in the classification of the situation. Like before, I said, if you see any single time people comment on what you do, like give you feedback, you see it as a personal attack.
Can I share what I recognize with that?
Okay, sure.
It's actually when you explain something to me that I already know. Like mansplaining, right? Like I already know that. Then I have a part of me that takes offense or needs to tell you that I already know. You can keep talking, but I just want you to know that I already know all of this.
but this is a perfect thing, right?
Yeah.
Because, of course, I mean, we're talking about engaging in different kinds of therapy. We're talking about spiritual development. It would be really surprising if every single thing I sit and say here is something you never heard before, right? That would be really...
It's not triggered right now, I'll say.
No, but it's interesting because, I mean, that would be weird, right? You've studied therapy. Of course you know some of the things that I'm saying. And all of the things that I'm saying, I just have it from different places and I strung it together into this system. So that would be really weird. Now, you can categorize that as mansplaining, right? A guy explaining a woman something that she already knows. That is a perfectly legitimate and possible way of categorizing the situation. However, categorizing the situation in that way has an effect for you. You feel offended, right?
Yeah.
And the thing about the way we classify things, there is no true way of classifying it, a situation. Any given situation can be classified in a number of ways which are equally plausible or equally legitimate. But every single classification, if you classify it in one way, you'll feel in a certain way about the situation, and you will have a certain range of possibilities within which you can do trial and error learning. If you classify it differently, you will have a different feeling and a different set of possible actions within which you can do trial and error learning. Sometimes the way we classify a situation will give us maybe a negative feeling and provide us with a set of options for how to deal with the situation, and none of these are good options. And that's very problematic. We will experience this as this is an unsolvable problem. This is a Gordian knot. This is the kind of unsolvable situation.
Yeah.
But why is it unsolvable? Because of the way you classify the situation. Because you classify the situation in a way that doesn't give you any good options to act. So, for example, I don't know, if I'm curious now, right? If I tell you something that you've heard somewhere else or already know or something like that, what would be an alternative way of classifying that situation? You can call it mansplaining, but you can also classify it as something else, right?
Yeah, I mean, since it's not activated in me right now, I think it's because I'm curious about your perspective exactly in this book.
Yeah.
So it's not doing anything, but in many other situations, as I receive teachings, it can come up. So I'm just gonna try take that question into that situation where someone is teaching me. What was the question again? How can I see it?
What are other ways of classifying? But I think you already answered the question, right? You can classify it as mansplaining. You can classify it as, oh, this is a situation where I'm receiving teaching. You can classify it as a way, this is a situation where somebody's explaining their way of understanding something.
Yeah.
Right? These are all legitimate ways of classifying the situation where I'm trying to put words to and express my understanding of a situation.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's like very interesting to look at the different ones. Of course, if you think about it as mansplaining, right? There's the whole gender issue when you feel like offended and all sorts of things. If you think it as about receiving teaching, I think many people will say you will with that classification, you see yourself as the one that knows less and the other one as somebody that knows more. If you classify it as somebody who's trying their best to express their understanding, there is no hierarchical difference.
That's a good one, yeah.
It's just you're actually honestly and sincerely interested in how do I try to express my understanding. And I might express an understanding that you already have the same understanding, but then you go, oh, he used that word instead of that word, and that's actually interesting, or something else, right? You glean some nuggets of gold.
So would that be to notice the positive state in a way? That I could, from a teaching, I could actually find something, oh, this is...
I mean, I think there are situations where each of these classifications would be the one that helps you engage best with the situation. So, for example, imagine that I think in an interview like this, you're interviewing me, right? You're asking me to come to your podcast, and I think that the third one is probably gives you the best menu of of how to act, because I'm trying to put words to something. And if you say this is a situation where another human being is trying to give expression to their understanding of certain psychological processes, that might say that what are the things that you can try out in that situation. You can ask different questions to help me express what I'm trying to say clearer, to help me if I sort of go off on a tangent, you bring me back, or you have the audience in mind. So if I use like lingo or something that where you think my audience won't understand that, you'll ask me questions to clarify it, or you provide the clarification. So thinking about it in that way will give you a range of possibilities to choose from that I think are probably the range of the kind of actions that are most useful for this situation. If we go to the other side, you can say the mansplaining thing. If you imagine at work, for example, you are, you're presenting a project or something like that, and some guy comes in and explains everything, even though you know it, and you say, no, this is actually a situation where it's important for a third party to know that I know.
Yeah.
So therefore, I have to put a boundary, right? And I have to say, well, dude, I know this. And this is, whatever. You say something that demonstrates your knowledge, because you have a different audience. Yeah. It's a different, you have a different purpose. So I think each way of classifying can be useful, but it can never be right or wrong. It's not like, in this situation, it is mansplaining or it is sharing that's your way of classifying.
It's just my way of classifying, my perspective, my interpretation of the situation.
Exactly. And classifications can't be right or wrong. It's like not in what we're talking about. Of course, that's different. Like, is a tomato a fruit, right? That can be a right or a wrong classification, but a lot of the psychological stuff we're talking about, like, for example, if somebody gives you a compliment, right? What's that? Is it a gift? Is it
inappropriate?
Is it inappropriate, right? Is it seduction?
Is it too much? Is it too little?
Is it a motivational thing?
Yeah.
Right? It's none of these things. But you can choose to classify them as some of these things. And how you classify it has an impact. How you classify situations create the world to which you are reacting. And this is one of the main ways in which we create the world we live in, by classifying our experience into structuring our experience and classifying our experiences.
Do we have an advantage? I mean, do we take advantage, like, as I classify something, is there something in it for me? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So why do I classify the way that I do?
You classify things because the moment you classify things, you can have repeated experience of the same situation, and you can engage in trial and error learning. So you can get better at dealing with that sort of situation.
So that feels safe to interpret this.
It's a way of learning how to engage with the environment. But in order to learn to engage with the environment, you have to structure the stream of your experience into repeated types of situations, and then you learn to interact with each of these types. But the types are not given in your experience. It's something you impose on your experience.
Yeah, because you were saying there is not the same situation ever.
No, exactly. You have to invent the categories of experiences that you then can learn to deal with. Mm-hmm. Like, one of my favorite examples is, because it's so simple, imagine in your work you experience a problem and a solution and another problem and a solution and another problem and a solution and another problem and a solution. Sounds familiar, right? This is basically work is just like this endless string of problems and solutions. Okay, so how do we structure that? You can structure it in different ways. Some people will say, every single time I've solved a problem, another one arises, right? So you say, solution, problem, full stop. Solution, problem, full stop, right? This endless string of problems and solutions, you cut it into sequences of solution and problem, and then you say, every single time I solve the problem, another one arises. And you're feeling slightly depressed about this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Sisyphus work.
You're making me depressed right now, actually.
But then you like the other way, right? Because if you have problem, solution, problem, you can move the full stops one. And then you can say, every single time we're faced with a problem, we solve it.
Oh, yeah.
You feel it?
Yeah.
It's a completely different feeling. Now, how you put in the full stops, that's you. There's nothing in the experience that dictates how you should put in the full stops. But how you put in the full stops completely changes your feeling about the situation, right? One makes you feel depressed, the other one makes you feel invincible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's quite a powerful example because it can be scaled up to, this is my life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Something always comes along and takes me down again. But then you can say, I always rise again.
Exactly.
Every single time.
Yeah.
Just hit me. I'm gonna rise again.
Many times I use a similar, I propose a similar change in how to structure the experience when I work with clients. So when you work with clients, they will sometimes they will bring the same problem more than once, right? It happens.
Yeah, we tend to do that
frequently.
Yeah.
So some clients will say, oh my God, right? It's like, again, I'm going to spend an hour talking about my low self-worth. When is this going to be over, right? When are we going to solve this problem for real, right? So they say, every single time I come to a therapy session and I work with my low self-worth and I think I solved it, and then I go back home and it's there again, right? So this is a little bit like saying every single time I solve it, another problem arises, right? Or actually the same problem
comes
arises.
up again. Yeah, it's never really healed.
Exactly. But then I try to say, sometimes I ask people, well, let's change how we categorize this or classify this situation. So let's look at it. First session, you brought the problem of low self-worth, right? And maybe we talked about what does it feel like to be confident. And you explored the concept of confidence, you explored situation where you felt confidence, and that brought you in touch with the felt sense of confidence, right? You felt that solidity, that grounding, that like nothing really gets you. It's like, that sense of nice weightedness in your body, right? You're comfortable in your skin. Awesome. You had that experience. Okay. It didn't make the low self-confidence vaporize from your entire life. So you come back and you say, well, sometimes I still feel, I doubt myself and feel low self-esteem. Okay. We work with it and we notice that one of the reasons for the low self-esteem, or what's common in many of the situations where you feel low self-esteem, is actually you're feeling angry, but you're repressing your anger. And by repressing your anger, you're cutting yourself off from a resource that you need to deal with the situation, right? You cut yourself off from your vitality. And then we explore, what would it feel like if you didn't do that, right? And you feel this rush of energy, right? And you go like, oh, wow, if I just spoke my mind, right? And didn't cut myself off or anything, like, oh my God, I'd be on fire. And you feel this energy in you, right? Great. Okay. Now for sure it's done, right? You go home. But sometimes the low self-esteem is still there. You come back to the slide, and then we have to do a third round, right? And then this time maybe we do something like, Well, why is it such a problem? What if you relieved yourself of the burden of having to have so much confidence, right? It's hard work to have confidence.
Yeah.
What if you don't care about it? Just don't have confidence, right? You go like, oh my God, it would be such a relief if I just accepted that I had low self-esteem.
Yeah, actually.
Such a relief, right? And you find this deep inner sense of peace and relaxation.
Yeah.
Now look at what's happened. You can look at this and say 3 failed attempts at solving the problem, or you can say 3 sessions where going to the same problem revealed to you 3 awesome states, right? By working with this, you found grounding, you found vitality, and you found peace. This low self-esteem seemed to be a treasure finder, right? When you look at it like that, you go like, I wish I never lose this low self-esteem, because it seems to reveal all the treasures of the world to me when I keep going back to it.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
It's a legitimate way of classifying the situation. The one is not more right than the other, but the one will provide you with a better set of possibilities to choose from in your trial and error learning than the other one.
So the complaint from the client would be, it just keeps coming back. And then you would say, but every time we
you
go
find something new.
You find something new. Yeah.
You find a resource within yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. What else can do that for you, right?
It would be nice if it stayed, though.
Oh, but the the having experienced those different states means you know that you are capable of experiencing. That never goes away. You know that's a possibility now. Maybe before you felt the vitality, you thought that you weren't a particularly vital person, but when you felt it, you go like, whoa, I really have a lot of energy. I didn't know that. I may not always have access to it, but I know that it is there.
It's there. Yeah.
And that means that now I can get curious about what am I doing to block the state.
Yeah. My agency in it.
Yes, my agency. And now that is a much better action opportunity or possibility for action than anything that is offered if you classify this as just a problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. Because it's an ongoing development of your agency in a way, or your perception of agency.
Yeah. You can discover the fullness of who you are at a spiritual level just by keep returning to low self-esteem. It's amazing. No better teacher.
Great. Is that okay? It's the final words for this one, or do you have something you just want to finish with?
Maybe this one, because the other ones we've talked a lot around the concrete process and stuff like that. When I work with a knot of alienation, there's a couple of phases. The recognizing it is just seeing whenever clients feel that there's a negative state that they're not creating, or a lack of a positive state and they're not creating it.
Yeah.
Then now we recognized it. Then the next thing is you have to subtly suggest to them that maybe they're involved in that. So I'll ask questions like, how do you create the negative state? Or how do you avoid noticing the positive state? Some people, they just launch into the experience. Some people say, no, I don't do that. I just told you it's created by external circumstances. Then you have to sort of discredit that narrative, and you can do that in many different ways. We touched a little bit upon it, right? It's like, for example, you can say, well, surely you weren't born with a deep sense of purposelessness, right? Because no baby has a deep sense of purposelessness. You must have learned it. Yeah. So you are involved. There's other ways of doing that. Then the next thing you do, once you've suggested it and then they accepted it, then you explore what are the ways that you do it. And there are many ways of doing it, but all of them have to do with how you structure your ongoing experience, how you classify it, how you punctuate it, how you structure it.
How you structure your ongoing experience.
Yeah, into sequences of repeated experiences. This is really where your agency lies, or that's the agency that you often overlook.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're usually focused on the agency that has to do with choosing one course of action over another, not the agency of how
the organization itself.
Yeah, structure your experience, your stream of your experience into repeated situations.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next thing, and you can flip these two phases sometimes, but another thing is looking for the motivation. Why do you do this? Because sometimes you say, well, why would I create a sense of being less than others? Right? That seems contrary to my interests. And you say, well, often there are what you can say hidden benefits.
Hidden benefits, yeah, so that's what I was talking about. With there's an advantage here for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you're less than others, you don't have the burden of responsibility or something like that. You never have to prove yourself. Whatever. There can be many hidden benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final thing that I think is important is, and I think this is really important, when you work with a knot of alienation, the purpose isn't to find the right way of classifying your experience. The purpose is to open your eyes to how you do classify your experience and how that has effects on you. Okay. Because that establishes a feedback loop through which you can learn about the processes that creates the world within you, within which you live. And it doesn't just create the world within which you live, it also creates your sense of self. Actually, many times, and we don't have time then to go deeply into this, but I'm just going to mention it.
Yes, sure.
And that is, in many spiritual traditions, they talk about ego death.
Yeah. That is annoying. You're going to mention this just in the end.
Like, ego death is, well, then people have to read the book, right?
Yes.
Ego death is nothing other than a natural consequence of learning to perceive how you classify the stream of experience into repeated situations. Because personality traits are really just names for how you classify your experiences. If you repeatedly classify experiences, if you classify the stream of your experience into a situation where you're always helping other people, then you experience yourself as a helpful person.
It keeps happening.
Exactly. When you unravel this process of classification and see it your own doing, you also unravel your ego. And I think that is such this is one of the reasons I like Gregory Bateson. I think it's amazing that just thinking logically about different learning processes, you come to a place where you can understand what ego death is. I think that is absolutely phenomenal. It's not a mysterious thing. It's not like a strange thing. It's just a natural consequence of a certain kind of learning process.
Well, Gregory Bateson's work, if I'm not mistaken, is also bridging spirituality and science, or science and spirituality.
Well, he drops a lot of hints.
Okay. Yeah. So, but your work is...
I definitely use his works exactly to do that. Yeah, and my work is very much focused on bridging spirituality and science. And this is why when I find somebody who is just thinking logically and clearly, and by thinking logically and clearly, they come to say a lot the same conclusions as you find in spiritual teachings, I'm a fan instantly.
I'm a fan. Great. Thank you so much for this, Claus.
Thank you.
Yeah. Number 4.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll see you for
the next
fifth one. The next one. Yeah.